There comes a point in every awakening when the world begins to fade, not because you turn away from it, but because it no longer recognizes you. What once felt vibrant now sounds like distant echoes. Conversations that once mattered lose their gravity. You start to notice the masks people wear, the endless performance of certainty and control, and the way society clings to distraction as if silence were a threat. You no longer belong to the same rhythm. You move slower. You listen deeper. You disappear, not in body, but in essence. Carl Jung foresaw this. He wrote that the individual who individuates, who becomes conscious of their shadow, will inevitably step out of the collective trance, and when you do, the world no longer welcomes you as one of its own. The collective needs conformity to survive. The awakened being becomes an anomaly, a mirror too clear, a presence too still. You do not leave society to reject it. You leave because the noise no longer carries meaning. This withdrawal is not depression. It is not apathy. It is the necessary death that precedes rebirth. The caterpillar cannot become the butterfly by staying in the garden. It must retreat into darkness, silent, unseen, dissolving its own form. In that solitude, you too begin to melt. Everything you thought you were, every role, every belief, every label, starts to dissolve. The mind panics, for it cannot measure what is becoming. But awareness does not need definition. It only needs space. The spiritually awake person disappears because they are no longer entertained by the illusions that sustain the crowd. They have seen the machinery behind human behavior, the fear-driven conversations, the unconscious competition, the endless search for validation. They see how society mistakes busyness for purpose, and how most people would rather drown in distraction than sit alone with their own reflection. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The awakening strips you of false comfort until only truth remains. But truth is not gentle. It burns. It takes away everything you held on to for safety, opinions, relationships, ambitions, until all that remains is raw being. And in that nakedness, solitude becomes sacred. Silence becomes the only language that makes sense. You realize that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of something higher, consciousness itself, untouched by the noise of the world. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned, few can bear that privilege, because to become authentic, you must let die every version of yourself that was created for acceptance. Individuation demands solitude, not as escape but as initiation. You withdraw not to hide from the world, but to become invisible to everything false. In that invisibility, the real work begins. As the world fades, something else awakens. A deeper intelligence beyond thought. You begin to see through the architecture of the collective mind, the endless striving, the constant comparison, the psychological games. They all collapse into absurdity. You realize that the collective itself is asleep, dreaming of meaning, building identities out of shadows. And when you awaken, you're no longer inside that dream. You become the observer of it. This is why the spiritually awake often disappear quietly. They don't announce it, they don't rebel. They simply slip away, unnoticed by those still hypnotized by motion. They leave the stage of the collective play and walk into the forest of silence. Some think they are lost, but they have found something the world has forgotten. Stillness. They have remembered what it means to simply exist. But solitude is not the end. It is the transformation chamber. In that silence, your perception sharpens. You begin to feel the pulse of existence in every breath, the sacred intelligence moving through everything. The pain of separation softens into a strange peace. You start to understand that you never truly left society. You only left its illusion. The real world was always here beneath the noise, waiting to be seen. Jung called this the reconciliation of opposites, the moment when consciousness stops fighting the unconscious and begins to dance with it. When you stop trying to fix the world and begin to understand it. When you realize that the outer chaos was always a reflection of inner disorder. Solitude teaches you this balance, that healing the world begins with healing perception. Eventually, after a long season of silence, something shifts. The need to speak returns, not from ego, but from clarity. The awakened one re-emerges, not to preach, but to embody. Their presence becomes their message. They speak softly, move slowly, and carry the weight of truth lightly. They no longer argue with illusion. They illuminate it simply by existing. This is the paradox Jung understood. The one who disappears must one day return. But when they do, they are no longer the same person who left. They return not to change the world, but to live as the world changed through them. Their disappearance was never an ending. It was a purification. To vanish from society is to step into the silence from which all creation begins again. So if you find yourself fading from the crowd, don't resist. You are not vanishing. You are refining. The darkness that isolates you now is the same darkness that will reveal your light. In solitude, you are not alone. You are surrounded by the unseen, by the ancient rhythm that moves beneath all things. You are returning to the source. Let the world forget you for a while. Let the noise pass without needing to follow it. Because one day when you return, you won't be part of the noise. You'll be the stillness that reminds others what silence feels like. This is not disappearance. This is evolution. The vanishing of the false self. The quiet re-emergence of the soul. As Jung might have said, in the end, the one who dares to face the darkness is the one who carries the dawn.